Hello, yesterday I posted a video, Faith, Hope and Charity. Link will be in the description. Now, in that I mentioned Freemasons and Faith, Hope and Charity and the good works connected with that. Now, in previous videos along similar themes, I have the same type of comments, and rather than talk about it in the comments, I think I'll do a video on it, and I want to show you a very important part of history, an essential part of history, which we are not told. Now, the Masons are said to be at the center of every conspiracy out there, but the Masons are just one organization. Others, Oddfellows, Mechanics, Druids, Temperance, Good Templars, and many others, Foresters, Free Gardeners. These are the organisations which are very important but have been written out of history, and so it's often said these organisations, whenever there's the G and the all-seeing eye, that they're at the centre of every conspiracy. Well, I'm going to present you with some information and we'll basically challenge that and actually say that there is very much in many very important ways the actual reverse has happened, and there has been a conspiracy against them, and please bear with me. I know this is immediately going to trigger a bunch of people, but no, let's just follow this through, and please trust me, I'll take you through it, and I will illustrate my point. The history has been de-written to present, well, to malign these groups because they are very dangerous to the establishment. And so firstly we'll begin, secret societies, okay, immediately they're going to go to Illuminati and to Masons. Well, Oddfellows, Druids, Free Gardeners, Independent United Order of Mechanics, the Independent Order of Oddfellows are just some of these, and Temperance, Good Templars, they have been essentially removed from the history books, and I'll show you some examples of that. First to begin with, we'll begin with the Oddfellows, the IOOF, and where are we? Okay, bear with me a moment. Okay, so first I want to begin with the Independent Order of Oddfellows, or the well, there are a couple. I'm going to just refer to them as Oddfellows because, as with so many of these groups, there are many little independent lodges. It's not one grand, united, grand, vast conspiracy. And not only that, the history, the importance of them has been removed from history by the very same people who are, for instance, Rockefeller, Rothschilds are said to be behind the Masonic conspiracy. At the higher levels, they don't need a secret society. They've got their own thing going on. The Masons, Oddfellows, Druids are not secret societies. They have big buildings with the banners. You can look them up on the telephone books. You can see their buildings. They're a society that have secrets, but they're not a secret society. But so this is some insignia, regalia of the Oddfellows, and Foresters of America. So the Foresters are the Ancient Order of Foresters, as they're also called. Now, if you look through, Friendly Society or a Mutual Aid Society, and that's what they were, and they were very important. They were for the common person. They're not part of an elite conspiracy. The Ancient Order of Foresters, the All-Seeing Eye. So these will be the same themes in their insignia, like the All-Seeing Eye. Unity, Benevolence and Concord. The same themes along the lines of Faith, Hope and Charity with these particular organisations. So the Foresters was essentially a trade union in a way, but people working in the forestry industry would pool their resources together to help with foresters. They would, it was a deadly profession. So their widows and their children would be left behind, and so they would organise scholarships, pensions, even then nursing homes, doctors and lawyers, and all these services the common person could only access through this organisation. You couldn't just call up a corporation and get health insurance. You couldn't just run down to a government-run hospital. They did not exist. These organisations were at the heart and the beginning of these. Now, before we go to there, again, the Independent Order of Foresters, again, the columns, all of this, the same symbols, especially the all-seeing eye. uh, the handshake, and again this secret handshake, as it said. Now this was a way, for instance, one of the services they would give is if you were a member and you had a secret password and you have a secret handshake, when you were moving from town to town, they would often run maybe a tavern, or they would invite you to stay in their home. So again, before you had motels and hotels and which were again more for the rich people, for the common person, the only way to get accommodation, food, not be robbed, not be tricked, not and comment, was to be a member of this group, and to know the secret password and the secret handshake. They couldn't just have any old Tom, Dick, and Harry walk along and abuse them. You had to be in good standing, which meant you had to pay your dues, which was a very small percentage of your wage, and that small percentage of your wage would pay for healthcare, legal services, accommodation, either free or cheap, and again, friendship. And you always would have a friend if you were a member of this group. And IOF, Independent Order of Foresters, again, the all-seeing eye, the handshake. So that's where it comes from, and it is a secret. Okay, again, you'll never walk alone. So when you're a member, they will look after each other. It was often called a fraternal society. You're still now, Masons will call each other brother, because you were a brother in that, you look after one another. Not necessarily, there is always whenever there's whenever there's more than 3 people together, someone's going to be a bastardo, or when you have 10 in an organization or 100, you're going to have bad people in there. That, so any group is going to have bad people in there. So to say that, again, this vast conspiracy thing, well, it's not true. Now, Independent Order of Foresters, so especially in the 1800s into the 1900s, as they grew, they were able to build hotels, insurance companies to service their workers better. Usually, they were originally just, in the local town hall, they would get together, but then as they grew, they were able to develop. So this is a temple building in Toronto, Canada, and foresters and the forestry industry, very important there. And they also organise the days before radio and television, parades. They would have organised dances, balls, fetes, charity events. So also it was a centre for entertainment if you were a member. So Independent Order of Foresters. If you were a member, you got a lot of different services. But okay, before we go to there, so okay, before I I'll just get straight to it, I suppose. So this is not only with the foresters, but I've got a couple of old dictionaries. So I've got a World Book Encyclopedia 1973 and the year 2000 version. Now, in the 1973, Foresters of America is a fraternal benefit society, which was once part of the ancient order of foresters. It provides insurance for its members, has paid over 100 million for its members' illnesses, benevolent purposes, and death benefits. Branches of foresters are organised in the form of 12 grand courts and about 400 sub-courts. So it's not just like like the Grand United Lodge in London is, in terms of masonry. There was also many independent little organisations. That's how it really worked in the start. So now when it's spoken about, it's a vast conspiracy with this, one grand leader who controls it all. No, it's not the way it worked. Not the way it worked at all. It was about small independent lodges that would. So one small lodge in one town, if the business went belly up there, the workers couldn't pay and they couldn't contribute, and so the lodge would collapse. But if lodges got together and pooled their money together, they could support one another. So that's how it really worked. Now, in recent times, it has been brought under a central control, but it's still we don't hear about them, but there are still many small lodges that work in this familiar way. But 1973, it was noteworthy in World Book Encyclopedia. By the year 2000, it doesn't exist. It's been written out of history. This is what you will find consistently through so much of official history, and not just the establishment and elite-controlled history. You'll also see it not spoken about by those who claim to be truth seekers. We're uncovering the vast Titanic conspiracy. BS to the extreme, mate. They're doing a great. They're actually working against, and I would call them plants. yeah, part of it. You know, Lenin said, if you want to control the opposition, you own it. So we have on the internets, we have Icke and Jones who consistently and persistently put this stuff down and say it's all vast demonic conspiracy. Never once do they talk about this. Never once. They're frauds or extremely ignorant. Now we'll go to the IOOF, Independent Order of Oddfellows. Same thing. Friendship, love, and truth. So again, they would organise schools, scholarships. Cheap accommodation, safety, benefits. Now again, we see the snake, very much in the vein of Asclepius, the cornucopia, and the anchor, which are the same themes seen in Masons, and even the beehive, their cornucopia, once more, the horn of plenty. You know, you always we would be fed, and now they're very much connected because all of these organisations are arranged in the same way what Masons are. Masons didn't invent this. It's, they're one element of this older stream of mutual aid societies, and who have these esoteric symbols behind them. Okay, I already mentioned the Foresters were written out of a World Book Encyclopedia. Now, 1973, the same encyclopedia, Independent Order of Oddfellows, a fraternal, benevolent society. They organised, well, the same thing, insurance, protection, scholarships, schools, hospitals, pharmacy, healthcare, and they were huge. So in the at the beginning of the 20th century, they had millions of members, millions of them around the world. Now, each member would have a family which was also protected under them. So the widow would get widow's insurance, the children would get scholarships, and the men themselves would be protected. There was no work cut, there was no occupational health and safety, there was no death benefits, there was nothing like that. Only through these organisations it will come. So all the benefits that we take for granted now were born from these organisations and have been taken over by the government and by corporations, because they saw the power of making people dependent on them, as where these organisations saw the power of making people powerful through mutual aid, through help. But 1973, it was noteworthy. They didn't go away. The IOOF have always been around, but now it's disappeared from the history once again. And even the Oculist. Now, Oculist is another secret society, but I won't go into that now. This is an emblem, standard emblem of the Oddfellows. Even we might notice that, but the heart and the hand. The triple link. This is a dead giveaway to Oddfellow symbolism. In the Pickers show, I saw them once. They visited someone who had Oddfellow artifacts. He wouldn't discuss about their rituals, but this is a Goliath paper mache mask, which they would use in their rituals. Again, we see the all-seeing eye, the columns. It's the same as what, the Aristotle. Okay, that's something different. Oddfellow Memorial here in Sydney. This is from the 1920s. Now, I'm going to do a longer version on the Oddfellows. This actually talks about how the health system arranged by the lodges was broken apart by the the AMA. The doctors and the lawyers hated these clubs because they had to compete for lodges with them, so they despise the elite despise the fact that they had to work for these organisations, and that's why they're still maligned now. Goliath mask again, the handshake, the same emblems and symbols. Okay, again, all saying I, the triple link. Independent Order of Oddfellows, what does it stand for? Well, the IOOF in Australia is now demutualised. It's a corporation and it's one of the largest financial services. Its origins is now lost. It is now shareholders hold this. Even might notice the Vesica there. And they're a big company now. And so the IOOF used to be good. Now the IOOF, Key Invest and a few other companies, they demutualise. It's not about mutual aid anymore. It's about a corporation and cheating people. So IOOF, again, the heart and the hand, the dove, the beehive, the eye, the triple link. Okay, so Independent Order of Oddfellows, the triple link, and this very Masonic board. But what does it mean? Well, we see the all-seeing eye, but there are friendship, love, and truth being the triple link. Now, I've recently did a video, the rod of Asclepius, which is the Roman god of health and healing, because they would provide health services. We also have the scythe and the skull and the hourglass, symbols of death, because they would cemeteries, funeral costs, widows' pensions, scholarships for children whose father had passed away and was no longer bringing in the money. These are what these symbols also represent. We have the cornucopia, which is you have fresh fruit and grain there, fresh produce, as in the Roman Greco-Roman Demeter, or Ceres as she called, as in Ceres, fresh produce. We also have the beehive, which is a symbol of organization and industry, but it also represents the Roman god Aristaeus, who was the god of beekeeping and cheese making, amongst other things. So Aristaeus is the god of food that would last. You can put that on, honey, cheese lasts on the shelf, as where fresh fruit and produce does not last. But again, so in the summer, but you would have fresh food. In the winter, you would have to rely on honey and cheese and these types of things. So that's another symbol where even in good times and bad times, they would look after you. There's always multiple levels to these, and it's just, again, internet style. Oh, it's a skull, therefore it's they're behind death or something like that. Well, again, another the same thing. The Asclepius, the skull, the hourglass, the scythe. Friendship and the handshake, and the secret handshake, because only members would be able to get their services. They couldn't afford to look after everyone. We also see the sun and the moon, the 7 stars, weights and measures, nice one there as well, the 3 columns, the cornucopia there, and a lot of their rituals in the Oddfellows and all these organizations, in fact, are based around biblical stories. For instance, they said, what do Masons do? Masons make better men. And it was, to develop truth, honesty, and friendship. And these, everyone just focuses on the Masons, but there were many organizations like this, and they organized all those things I mentioned earlier, from entertainment to protection to, again, the mother without the child, also schooling and wisdom and food and law and order. So even back then, it was more like there were police around, but policing was also done on a more of a local level, mutual aid, people looking after one another, looking after their community, looking after their family, and coming together. And this is what it was. Now, so you see the symbols there anyway. So the IOOF now is a for-profit private company with shares. Rather, it used to be a mutual society. Peter Ogden, sea captain. Now, originally the Oddfellows in America were connected directly to the Oddfellows in England, but because of the War of 1812 and American Revolution, all that stuff, the American Oddfellows did not want to be connected to the English Oddfellows. It was not a good thing to be. But at that time in Canada and in America, most Oddfellows, well, the larger ones, was for whites only. So Peter Ogden, African American, went to England and got a warrant to create Oddfellows, which would allow black people to join. And we'll see that in some other organisations such as Good Templars and Temperance and stuff. So if you look back at prior to the New Deal and the Insurance Acts here in Australia and England, things like the NHS, we're sort of been promoted that these are really, really good things, but well, they're not as good as what you might think, because it was about bringing people under the control of government and corporations and moving away from mutual aid societies. The Rebecca Lodge was like the women's organisation within the Oddfellows. You still have a few Independent Order of Oddfellows friendly societies, so they're still around, but they're not as big as they were, but they're still, and they tend to operate more like corporations. Now, for instance, here in Australia, before the health insurance went under government control, people such as the Oddfellows, who had been arranging health insurance, healthcare for some time, were expert at it. And what happened was that the government when they organised the first governmental healthcare systems, they didn't know how to arrange it, so they looked to these organisations and would issue contracts to them. Now, over the years, they become demutualised, but we still have some traces of these independent organisations that are not for-profit corporations run by the elite to control it. The previous video on Faith, Hope and Charity, I mentioned was a link in there to people such as the Rockefellers, the AMA, the Law Society despised these organisations because credit unions was another feature that they would provide. People could not get credit from the banks unless they were rich and had a lot of collateral. So the only way that the common man could buy a house and get the housing loan was through the credit unions, and building societies is another term for it. Now, it wasn't just about providing them money. Building societies also operated on the principle, everyone, let's get together, we'll build a house, and John gets one this week, and then next week we'll come together and we'll build another one, and then Sam, and eventually everyone would get a turn. So it wasn't just about the money, it was also about mutual aid, people coming to help you building society, and that's another element that we've lost. Oddfellow symbols again, beehive, same. These are, there's a lot of depth to this, and these emblems, and again, if you show it, typical internet snake oil merchants, like this guy will tell everything's evil, all Masons are bad. It's it's just shocking. Now this guy he's working for them. Maybe he's not getting paid for it, but to line his pockets, he's selling snake oil to make everyone hate these clubs. Show me once where he talks about this or elaborates on this, because I've never heard it. I've only heard him spread hate and ignorance. Same thing is with infotainment, misinfotainment. Alex Jones, the same thing. Everything's an evil conspiracy. Everything's Masonic, transhumanist, satanic, or whatever. They've got a long list of exposing problems. They've never provided an answer. Even he exposed himself recently because he admitted that he's an entertainer, that these rants that he does is for entertainment purposes. He's role-playing. That's what he is. This is not... There's nothing good from these people. They steal research, then they water it down and then add hysteria to it, and then they present a false narrative about it. So it's a kernel of truth wrapped around in hatred, ignorance, and hysteria. And again, these guys are just scum. Now, Oddfellows, again, you'll see the same. So the Templars chart, so again, the dove, all-seeing eye, this type of stuff. Also the ark. The Ark of the Covenant, because they're often called antediluvian societies, pre-flood societies. The Buffaloes, such as Fred Flintstone was a member of the lodge, Buffaloes Lodge. That's another one of these organisations. Everyone loves Raymond. The dad goes to the lodge. Knights of Columbus. Now you only see the old men there because that's all that's left of them. But back when they were young, the only way that they could get together and access health insurance, scholarships, widows' pensions, funeral costs and insurance was through organisations such as this. Now we just get on the phone and we put all our faith in government and corporations who hate these organisations because they take away their power. These, and they promote Alex Jones and David Icke, who promote this hysteria and ignorance surrounding this particular topic. So a lot of the trade unions for instance, early anarchists in America, when you see the history, you just get presented that they're some sort of terrorist organisation. They were involved in early trade unions, early mutual aid societies, and again, this type of thing. It's just it's a damn shame that it's all lost. Just you see these boards are just if you're unfamiliar, they're would just be Masonic evil or whatever. National Pharmacies was founded by the South Australian Oddfellows because a doctor and pharmacist, I mentioned in the earlier video, you had a lot of snake oil merchants selling snake oil, and so by being a member of here, they would hire a pharmacist and they would get together and they would buy quality medicines on bulk and you could be guaranteed that the medicine you were getting was actually what it says it was, rather than snake oil. Getting these same emblems. Alright, Oddfellows. So again, cornucopia. See how I mentioned earlier, we got the fresh produce overflowing. It's the summertime harvest, but you also have the beehive, which is again representation of not only organisation and industry, but also like cheese and, as in Aristaeus, preserved foods as well. A bit like a can drive. We still, still hear about that now. Again, they've been written out of history, and when you do hear about them, it's always in a very, very negative light, and never ever do they discuss these issues. Okay, now I mentioned earlier the foresters. Another one is Temperance. And when we hear about, for instance, here in Balmain in Sydney, there's a cluster of Oddfellows, Temperance and Masons. So we see Chelmsford Lodge and Hall, and you can see the compass and square, but also these symbols of the Temperance Society. Temperance is usually thought of as an anti-drinking society, which it was, but it is also on Masonic lines. It was a friendly society, a mutual aid society. So Balmain Temperance Hall, and again you'll see with the architecture, the palmet and these same symbols are reoccurring over and over again. Now just on the side street, we also have the Temperance Lodge. And give me a moment, the computer's just not quite keeping up with me. But so again, if you're not familiar with them, you'd almost be confused. You'd think that they're Masons, but they're organised along the same line. This was not the term Oddfellow goes back at least to the 1400s, and it was used as a term for someone who's a member of a craft guild. So whether of carpenters, stonecutters, tilers, these types of professions, that was generally an Oddfellow. Then later the Oddfellow societies, organisations build up, and now it's a more specific term. For instance, you often hear the term free and accepted Masons. Anyone can join a Mason lodge now. Prior to 2-3 centuries ago, you had to be a Mason or a tiler or a brick mason, one of these professions. Okay, it's just not keeping up with me. Where were we? Druids, foresters. Okay, I have to pause a moment. Okay, pardon for that, the computer was slowing, but this is the Temperance Lodge Hall. So just around the corner from, so we have Chelmsford Hall and the Masons, there we have the Temperance Hall, and just down the side of his street here we have the Lodge Hall in 1900. And you'll often see these buildings dated to around that time, because that was the time prior to corporate and government getting involved in education, healthcare, hospitals, these types of things. You had to, these were the only people taking care of the common man. This is in Balmain. Now it's become gentrified, and the latte sipping crowd. It's very cool and fashionable. But in the day, Balmain was at the beating heart of the working man and industry. And there above the door, love, it's a bit broken, purity and fidelity. Again, so faith, hope and charity, this again the same things going on. Okay, now Temperance, so down in Melbourne, but you also see it's established 1876 once again around, so whether it's the growth in Australia, New Zealand, Canada and America, groups such as Oddfellows, Temperance, Foresters, Mechanics, Free Gardeners, so this is T&G, the Temperance in general. So there are these large buildings, especially in regional centres all around Australia. They created an insurance system before the takeover of the corporations, and because they had so many members, they were able to afford these types of things. It wasn't that the Rothschilds and Rockefellers were funding them. they looked after each other, and they were able to build this type of wealth. And so these town halls and where the local dance was, they would again organise fetes, parades, all sorts of entertainment as well. It wasn't just about insurance. It was also this feeling of friendship. Now, if you're a member of a lodge, you're also expected to attend the meetings. It was like you didn't just pay your dues, you also were expected to be an active member. So it wasn't just, again, it wasn't just about money. You were expected to attend the functions, and you were also for instance, if a fellow member got sick, the basic function was that they would organise, and so if someone got sick, you would arrange your neighbour to cook food, and another guy would come in and mow your lawns or do your laundry and take care of this. So there was the money aspect of it, but at the heart of it, it was mutual aid, about people coming together to look after one another. Again, that's another view of the T&G building in Newcastle, but the Sons of Daughters and Temperance. So it was a friendly society. When we mentioned, most people, when they hear about Temperance, they think it was a movement against alcoholism. Well, that was definitely part of Temperance, but it was a friendly society as well. And again, the all-seeing eye, emblems and symbols, again, Asclepius, the fasces, harvest and produce, looking after, mutual aid. In Washington, in the Washington Memorial, Washington Monument, I've got the picture up here somewhere. So the Washington Monument, famous now, there all around the Washington Monument, there are a series of plaques and various organisations, but Masons, Oddfellows, and these other groups we'll get to. Okay, so the Native United Sons was another one, and again you see the emblems, but yeah, Masons, Temperance, Oddfellows. Association of Journeymen was another one of these groups. Now the journeymen's still around. So stonecutters of Philadelphia, plumbers, early electricians, steam workers, metal workers, the Association of Journeymen. Now a journeyman, there's still a bit of a legacy of that, for instance, in Germany, where you see these travelling craftsmen where they dress up in old-fashioned style, and they will do their apprenticeship, and then they're expected to travel around for years to achieve their to gain their ticket. But again, with the same emblems and symbols. But of course, there's Masons, Oddfellows, and other groups there as well. But this is the Sons of Temperance. This is one of the plaques here at the Washington Monument. Another Temperance, Temperance, Temperance. Again, from the Templars of the Honor and Temperance Organization. The handshake, I recently did the Mithras one with the torches. Again, Noah's Ark and the antediluvian societies, as they're often called. Okay, now when you think of Temperance, it's usually this lips that touch, liquor shall not touch ours. Anyway, back in the day, I don't think they were quite so good at marketing. But anyway, right, but again, so the Temperance, just showing the progress of the drunkard. So it wasn't just about an anti-alcohol movement. There was a really big problem at that time as well, no doubt. But it was a friendly society. Order of the Sons of Temperance, love, purity, fidelity, friendly society. So they organising basic health insurance, funeral cover, widows' pensions, scholarships for education. They would get together and organise creating hospitals and these types of things as well. So that's Temperance. Now, Foresters I've done, Good Templars now. Another one, and the Good Templars are connected to the Temperance Society. They're very linked. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Peter Ogden and the organising Oddfellows for the black community. There you can see how important it was for this community as well. They weren't really looked after. Now, Independent Order of Good Templars, Friends of Temperance, welcome here. So it's a little bit of a link. Again, the snake of Asclepius, obviously in the top there, but again, we all seeing eye, the same principles, the cross and the anchor, the handshake. Now, temperance was multiracial, because you'll see other, so it wasn't just for blacks, it was also for whites as well, but unlike certain groups, it wasn't divided by race. All seeing eye, the handshake, once more, these same themes of mutual aid and sobriety, because the drunkenness at the time was destroying families, so that was one of the key themes. Bit of a canvas going on there, again, the anchor. There we see, again, so it was a multiracial organisation. And another one, Good Templars, faith, hope and charity. So again, recent upload was about faith, hope and charity. Okay, so that's the Templars, Good Templars. Now, another one, before I go to those, I did a video a while back, and I'll link that in the description as well. But the Druid Society, and this is a 1905 meeting of the Druids, and that's how Stonehenge looked at the time. So again, there's a bit of a thing, there's a bit of a conspiracy thing about Stonehenge being faked. There are plenty of pictures before the reconstruction and the archaeological work at Stonehenge. So it has been rebuilt, no doubt, but there's some really crazy stuff about the Stonehenge being faked. It's just not true. I did again video on the Druids. The same thing. They were a friendly society. They would organise, and the Druids were especially famed for organising Eisteddfods, singing competitions, dancing competitions. So it wasn't just about mutual aid. It was also about organising entertainment and a feeling of community before radio and television and the internets. Winston Churchill was an Oddfellow. Winston Churchill was a Druid. Now, immediately you might go, oh, this is proof that the elite run these things. Well, they would abuse these things. So Winston Churchill was a politician. Still now you see, politicians attending church and joining these clubs to gain votes and to appear to be, with the people. But they've got their fingers anywhere where they can get popularity and appear to be one of the commoners. They'll take that opportunity. That hasn't changed. And so these, and same thing with Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mother. She was a Druid, and she would attend Druid functions. But the Druids and all these organisations were common people. They weren't for the elite. The elite and the professions disliked them. And yeah, I've mentioned that anyway. Again, Stonehenge, a Druids meeting. Druids in Belgium for the baptism, I think it was one of the princes. And again, we see this symbol which has now become connected, and Valier as well. This is a constant symbol. Masons, Oddfellows, all these organisations. This is now being, of course, the little Austrian. In Melbourne, and there's also in Sydney, we see Druids House, again showing it because they ran credit unions insurance, and they were able to build some of the earliest nicer buildings, including community halls and this thing as well. And again, just a Corinthian order. So this is a canvas sleeves, which would be the Greek Corinthian order. We also see the palm columns, which are Egyptian as well. And that's again I won't go into that. I've done that in other videos anyway. The Rebecca Lodge in California. So it's again these local women getting together and organising local charity events, like organising local events. It's not a purely millionaires, mansions, billionaires, corporate leaders. This is the element that's been lost and not talked about, but it's still around. Okay, it's pretty much Druids friendly society. So until recently, again, the same thing where they organised nursing homes, retirement villages and home care. That's what they did traditionally, and they're still doing it now. But again, because of government involvement in these types of things and corporations getting it, they tend to now have contracts. So, for instance, nursing homes here in Australia tend to be run by one or two really big corporations, but there are still a few Druids, Masons and Oddfellows, retirement villages, home care, nursing home packages going on. Okay, Druids. Again, you still see ancient. Okay, so for instance, the credit union ran from 1957 to 2000. It's now been liquidated. As maybe if one of your ancestors was a member, there might be some money owing to you. So in some of these Temperance and General, Druid Society, these credit unions, they're still holding on to money which hasn't been declared. So that just might be something of interest, whether in Australia but elsewhere as well. Druids in Sheffield, still again affordable care, the Friendly Society, not a corporation for profit, it's a non-profit organisation. Again, Queen Elizabeth or princess at that time, but again they get involved in these things. But these, look at all the people. That's not the noble. There's not enough. You put all the nobles together, there's not enough there. This was a grassroots organisation, and then so whether it's Churchill or the Queen and these other people. And again, Curry. So the Druids and Oddfellows in around the Newcastle area, Temperance as well. I mean, they organised schools, hospitals back in the day before the government and corporate interests such as the Rockefellers broke these organisations up and got involved with it to take control. People helping one another. Okay. Okay, let's try and finish this one quickly. Now, there are a few other ones worth mentioning. Okay, I'll have to pause and just finish it off quickly. Okay, another secret society, and they're not a secret society, that's misinfo that's been put on around them, is the ancient order of free gardeners. And again, the sun, the moon, the 7 stars, the all-seeing eye, the anchor, the beehive, same emblems, same symbols, providing the same function. It's another one of them. Now, again, if you see this, it's Masonic, it's satanic, it's whatever. No. And finally, we'll end with the independent order of mechanics. So once again, you see this emblem. This is not Masons, this is the mechanics. And where we see the mechanics. So they're very strong. Okay, before we go, let's put the link. I'll put the link to this video in the description. The independent order of mechanics. You see they're still very strong, especially Jamaica, around the Caribbean, and in Florida, the independent order of mechanics. As the name says, they're mechanics, plumbers, working people, not elite. And it's not this, again, this has got the origin and the point of these organisations was for the working people. This link will be in the description. It's very interesting. You can just follow it through with some others. But again, this but they're at the these people are not at the centre of all this conspiracy. This is not satanic emblems. This is the ancient of, even still see the G there. So they're connected. What's just generally referred to as Masonic has a rich, important history. So Australia, Canada, America, in England, and here in Australia as well, they were so important to the founding of all these things we take as sacred and we take for granted, whether it's health insurance, funeral insurance, scholarships, widows' pensions. All of these things was founded by them and was actually in the period, especially just before and just after World War I, was taken over by the elites, because firstly they could make profits off them, and secondly it was about control, because people looking after each other do not need the government. They do not need big companies. And so that's what's happened. Again, we see there again the same emblems. It's compass and the square, the columns, the celestial sphere, which has the constellations, and the terrestrial sphere, Earth, as in terrestrial, the Earth, Terra. Beehive, once more again, and all those associated independent order of mechanics in London. And so these emblems, which are so often maligned, is part of love, unity, honour, truth, benevolence, secrecy as well, and fidelity. Now, why the secrecy? Well, for instance, in the I forget the exact year. You can look the Unlawful Oaths Act, the government in England, and which applied to all the colonies. There was a law you could not take a secret oath, an unlawful oath, because the government did not want you to do this. They did not want you organising without their... So if you wanted to start a lodge, you had to get a license from the government. So unlicensed groups such as this had to operate in secrecy. This extends back to the craft guilds period and the Inquisition and such. If you weren't operating under the church or the state or royalty, you were breaking the law. And that's why these organizations were so powerful, and the need for secrecy. Because no one was, if you didn't look after yourself, no one else was going to. And again, the New Deal, the Insurance Acts, was about breaking up these organizations and getting people dependent on a welfare state and on government control, putting faith in the machine. And now there's a few documentaries, people talk about this, a few books, and even showing how the Rockefellers funded various medical organizations, schools and stuff to break these guys up. And which brings me back to the snake oil merchants. Snake oil merchant, what does he say? He's always complaining everything's evil, satanic or whatever. Give me a solution, you idiot. And they offer no solution, and they're meant to be these expert researchers. They don't... How can they not know this? Well, they do, and they work for the corporation. These guys are the machine, and they whenever David Icke does a tour in Australia, they put him on mainstream TV. Alex Jones, as viewed on CNN and The View, he's a puppet. Whenever they want to pull someone out and make the conspiracy crowd look stupid, they pull these guys out because they're guaranteed to do an idiotic show, and the normal person who hasn't been exposed to the finer details of it will think, oh my God, does this guy represent this alternative stuff? Well, yeah, these guys are tools, they're puppets. Recently, Alex Jones was going through divorce proceedings, and he admitted that he is an entertainer, that he puts on a show. He's not a journalist, he's not a researcher, he is an entertainer, a master of misinfotainment and fake alternative news. He does a great job he's an actor, and he does a great job of it. He's brilliant at what he does, but what he does is not honest. What he does is not about finding solutions. He talks about all these noble things, but he never provides a solution. It's about making hate and division and ignorance, and that's what he does, and he's great at it. And so, again, this has been written out of history. You can see it in the old encyclopedias. The Oddfellows was noteworthy in 1973. By the current year, the IOOF, the corporation, the demutualised Oddfellows, is now a huge corporation here in Australia, one of the biggest financial services provider, but they've disappeared from the record. And the same thing happened with the Foresters is just another example. Why are they no longer noteworthy? They're historically very important, and they're still operating, even though now they're a corporation rather than a mutual aid society. Because this is forbidden history. The conspiracy is against these organisations. It's not a conspiracy by these organisations. And snake oil merchants and misinfo merchants are masters at keeping us dumb to this. And again, look, these are just intro. Again, I could do such a long... I could go on for quite some time. I'm meaning to do a long and detailed history of the Oddfellows, because they provide an excellent example of these types of organisations. Eventually I'll get around to doing that, because again, very well recorded, written history. So not just of the positive things that they've done for society, but also the conspiracy to break them up by the corporations, by the government, to get people dependent on the big organisations rather than the mutual aid societies. Okay, this is a Washington Monument. Now there are a lot of plaques which again show how important these groups were in the founding of the Republic and the founding here in Australia and New Zealand and Canada. And these, we used to have such a high standard of living, and it's only kept going down and down and down. But when when mutual aid, when people were looking after themselves and were not dependent on welfare, and we had strong families, we had good standard of livings, we had good prospects, we had good protections, and well, poverty is on the increase, and that's because we've lost this. These guys and these emblems, these symbols, these organizations are not the evil conspiring enemy. They are the solution. And we need to go back at this. And again, through the internet, we're only getting more and more divided. And through the snake oil merchants who are promoted by YouTube and blindly followed by so many, we're only increasing the divisions between one another. We're moving further away from where we need to be. Union, there is strength. In union there is strength. In disunity there is chaos. There is poverty. There is weakness, and in union there is strength, and that's why we need to go back to these, and that's why I'm so passionate about it as well, because here we have a solution, and the fakery by the so-called leaders of Paul Joseph Watson and these, I hold you in absolute contempt. You are meant, you promote yourself as these defenders and protectors, but you're not. You're just not, and you car these things, and you promote hatred and ignorance and division, and you have no solutions. You only encourage the negative. For instance, YouTube just keeps promoting this negativity. Even like I keep trying to, but they just keep promoting it. This is the machine at work. This is why this is not spoken about. This is why there is virtually no history about this ever talked about. And the proof is in the pudding. When will this, when does he say? Never. He only promotes, he's lining his pockets. An actor lining his pockets. He admits he plays a character. He doesn't play, and he's not a journalist. He's not a truth seeker, blah blah. He's taken it over, and these guys are the machine. These guys speak out against the corporations, but they work for them. That's why they're promoted. That's why they always go on mainstream news. And the solution is for mutual aid society, and they've been written out. Faith, hope, and charity. These are principles we need to embrace. These are the symbols and the principles behind these. We need to embrace them and lose the hatred of these things. And I hope you understand now why these are so important and so dangerous to the machine is this. And these are all intro points. Please, you can just keep digging down on yourself, and you'll see what. I'm not hot. Yeah, I can only touch on these topics that would take hours and hours and hours to go through the history. But hopefully you've got enough pointers, and hopefully you can, for those who are attached to this, you can. Obviously, you don't have to take my word for it, but here I'm giving you the pointers where you can find for yourself and liberate yourself from the snake oil which is going around. Now, if you look into any organization, a large organization, you're going to find bad people, and bad people tend to float to the top, as they say. But the building blocks, the majority of these, is the Queen's the head of the Church of England. Does that mean everyone who's in the Church of England is operating on royalty and involved in all this nefarious stuff? The Pope and the Vatican, that doesn't describe the bulk of the Catholic community or any other religion or group. You see, there's always masters at the top, but the essence of it, the truth of it is it's like the iceberg. The bigger part of it is submerged. It's not seen. Any time you get a number of people together, you're going to get nasty guys, and again, so straight away you'll see standard comments. Masons are all pedophiles, for instance. That's a constant thing that I always have to deal with. But where will you find these people? Where there are children, that's where they're attracted to, and so if someone makes a child charity, that doesn't mean that it's built by pedos for pedos, but pedos will get drawn to that. So that's why you find that's why it happens, and that's why they'll gravitate to that. The psychopath will do what a psychopath does, but that doesn't. Do we throw away every children's charity because a few monsters get involved? No, of course not. No, and yeah, any organisation that's large enough will, the monsters will, like the lion goes where the food is. He goes for the easy prey. That's just the way the world is. There'll always be bad people, and they'll always gravitate towards the weak and where they can find the victims. But that doesn't mean that we need to get away, because lion eat baby wildebeest. Does that mean, we don't do away with the savannah? The savannah is important. Well, anyway, I hope you get where I'm going with there, because if you've ever been on YouTube comment section, anything regarded to this, you'll just see it, that it's just there, it's persistent, and it's really, it's based on these type of dudes spreading their BS, misinfo, and that's what's going on there. And yeah, so please do look into it a little bit further, a little bit deeper. You'll find that it's been written out of the history, and that's a shame. And this is because this provides an answer to the problems that we have, rather than being the source of the problems that we have. It's the classic trick, to call the solution the danger, and then call the danger the fix. It's just, yeah. Anyway, with that, I hope you got something out of this. I didn't really plan it too well, so it's a bit of a rant, a bit of a ramble, but anyway, have a good one.